My name is Caroline Hayes. I'm 29 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life starts slipping sideways is that it rarely sounds like a disaster when it begins. There is no thunderclap, no dramatic silence, no shattering glass or raised voice loud enough to warn your body that something precious is already breaking. Sometimes betrayal enters quietly. Sometimes it sits beside you on the couch, wearing the face you trust most, and speaks in a calm voice, so ordinary that your brain needs a few extra seconds to catch up to what your heart already knows. 3 weeks ago, I still thought I had a boyfriend. Or maybe that is not the most honest way to say it. 3 weeks ago, I still thought I had a man who respected me. His name was Ryan Whitaker. We had been together for 2.5 years. I'm a diesel mechanic. I work on fleet trucks for a regional logistics company, which means my hands are usually rough. My jeans usually smell faintly like metal and oil, and no matter how hard I scrub, there is always a little grease that refuses to leave. I own 2 dress shirts, exactly 2. One white, one navy. I have never once used the word synergy in a sentence, and if God is kind, I never will. I say all that because it matters. Ryan had just started a new job about 5 months earlier at a mid-sized marketing agency, and from the day he got the offer, I knew it meant something big to him. Bigger title, better salary, better office, better future, according to the way his eyes lit up when he talked about it. He said things like culture forward and brand vision and growth track. I said things like, "That's amazing, baby, I'm proud of you." And I meant it. I took him out to celebrate the night he signed the paperwork. We went to this nice little steak place downtown that neither of us would have picked on a random Wednesday because it felt too expensive to justify. And I bought him the leather portfolio he'd been staring at online for 2 weeks without buying. He opened it at the table and smiled in that soft, almost boyish way he had when he let himself be unguarded. "You didn't have to do that," he told me. "I know," I said. "That's why it counts." He laughed and reached across the table for my hand, and in that moment he looked at me like I was the safest place in the world. It is amazing how long that memory can live after everything else dies. For the first couple of months, things seemed normal. He would come home and talk about his team, the projects, the office happy hours, the odd little rituals of corporate life that sounded half entertaining and half exhausting. I listened. I asked questions. I learned names. I nodded through stories about presentations and strategy meetings and clients who apparently needed 12 emails to say one simple thing. Normal relationship stuff. Supportive stuff. The kind of stuff you do when you love someone and want them to feel seen. Then, around the 3rd month, I started noticing something I could not unsee once it settled into focus. He never mentioned me at work. Not once. At first, it was subtle enough to ignore. He'd tell me a story about his weekend conversation with a coworker, and instead of saying we went somewhere, he'd say I went. Instead of my girlfriend and I tried that new place, it became I checked out this restaurant. I watched this movie. I spent Sunday doing errands. First. Like I had somehow slipped out of the grammar of his life. At first, I told myself not to be ridiculous. Plenty of people keep work and personal life separate. That is a real thing. That is healthy sometimes. Not everybody wants their relationship dragged into office chatter, and I respected that. I really did. But then it got harder to explain away. One Friday, his team went to a rooftop bar after work, and I texted asking if he wanted me to meet up afterward. He replied that it was more of a team thing. A few weeks later, his department had a cookout at his boss's place. Partners were invited. He told me he did not want to overwhelm people with introductions this early. That phrase stayed with me. This early. At month 3, maybe that excuse could still limp along. At month 5, it started to rot. By then, he still had not introduced me to a single person from work. Not one. Not by accident, not in passing, not even through a photo. And there is a kind of hurt that sneaks up on you, not because of what someone says, but because of how calmly they keep pretending there is no problem. One night, I finally brought it up. We were on the couch. He had his laptop open and was scrolling through work messages with that focused little crease between his brows. I was half watching some show I no longer remember, half watching him. I said, "Hey, your holiday party is coming up soon, right?" He didn't look up at first. "Yeah." "Am I going with you?" That was when he stopped. Not suddenly, slowly. He closed the laptop with the kind of careful, measured movement that tells you bad news has already chosen its seat in the room. He looked at me and said, "So, I need to talk to you about that." There are sentences that arrive with warning lights around them. That was one. I muted the television. He took a breath. "My coworkers think I'm single." He said it too casually at first. like maybe if he kept his tone light enough, the meaning would land softer. It didn't. I stared at him. What? It wasn't intentional in the beginning, he said quickly. No one directly asked, and I just never corrected the assumption. Then, after a while, it felt complicated to fix. I kept looking at him, because sometimes when someone says something ridiculous, your body just waits for the second half, the part where they make it make sense. He didn't. Instead, he said, and honestly, being perceived as single has helped. I actually laughed a little then. Not because it was funny, because it was so humiliating my brain needed somewhere to put the shock. Helped with what? With networking, he said. People are more open, more likely to invite me places, include me after hours, make connections. It changes the dynamic. I sat very still. So your career trajectory requires me not to exist? Caroline, don't make it weird. I turned and looked at him fully. Don't make it weird. You know what I mean. No, I said. Actually, I don't. Explain it to me like I'm not already sitting here trying not to feel insane. He exhaled, already annoyed, which was unbelievable considering he was the one confessing that he'd erased me from an entire section of his life. It's just how these environments work, he said. When people think you're available, they engage differently. They invite you out more. They include you in things. You seem more approachable. What kind of things? Professional things. What kind of approachable? He rolled his eyes then, and that tiny motion did something ugly to my chest. Not everything is about flirting. I didn't say it was. You implied it. I implied, I said slowly because I was trying very hard not to scream, that pretending your girlfriend of 2.5 years doesn't exist sounds less like professional boundaries and more like a lie. He leaned back against the couch like he was the one exhausted. You're being dramatic. There it was. That word. The emergency exit for people who do something cruel and do not want to sit in the discomfort of seeing it clearly. I looked at him for a long moment before I said, very calmly, there's a difference between keeping your personal life private and actively pretending you don't have one. He rubbed his forehead. You're making this deeper than it is. No, I said. I think you already did that all by yourself. The room went quiet after that. The kind of quiet that feels full of broken glass even when nothing has shattered yet. I dropped it that night, not because I agreed with him, and not because I was overreacting, but because some betrayals need space to fully show their shape. I had learned enough in my life to know that when someone lets a lie slip out that easily, the lie is never the whole story. So I paid attention. And once I started paying attention, things got uglier fast. The first thing I checked was his Instagram. Not because I'm proud of it, because intuition had already started whispering before my pride could stop me. He hadn't deleted our pictures. He had archived them, every single one from the last few months. Our beach weekend gone, my birthday dinner gone, the stupid mirror selfie where he had flour on his cheek because we'd tried making pasta from scratch and failed spectacularly, gone. His profile now looked like a carefully curated single-man mood board. Rooftop drinks, solo coffee shots, gym mirror photo, a blurry city skyline with some caption about gratitude and momentum. It was so polished it made my skin crawl. I scrolled farther back and found older photos still there, but the recent ones, the ones that would place me firmly in his current life, had been quietly removed. Not erased entirely, just hidden, like me. Then I checked LinkedIn, which honestly felt humiliating in a whole different way because if your relationship has reached the point where you are cross-referencing somebody's professional branding, your spirit already knows the truth, even if your mouth has not admitted it yet. He had rewritten his About section, not dramatically, just enough. He talked about exploring the city, connecting with like-minded professionals, building meaningful relationships across industries. I read that sentence 3 times because there was something about it that made my stomach tighten. Not because it proved cheating, it didn't, but because it sounded like someone auditioning for a version of himself that had no room for me in it. And then there were the comments. Male colleagues, mostly. Love this take. We should grab coffee and discuss further. Brilliant perspective. You always bring such interesting energy to these conversations. Maybe all of it was innocent. Maybe. But innocence has never needed this much staging. I still said nothing. I just watched, listened, collected. Then luck, if you want to call it that, showed up wearing basketball shoes. A friend of mine from my rec league team mentioned one night after a game that his wife had recently started working at a marketing agency downtown. Same company as Ryan. Different department, but same company. I kept my voice casual when I asked which one. He named it. My heart did this strange little drop, like my body was already stepping down into a truth it hated. I asked a few more light questions. Holiday party coming up? Big event? partners invited?" He said, "Yeah, it's +1. My wife's dragging me to it." I remember smiling, not because I was happy, because something inside me had just gone cold and clear. Later, after I gave him the short version, the real version, not the cleaned up one, he looked at me for a long second and said, "That's messed up." "Yeah," I said. Then he added, "You should come with us." I looked at him. He shrugged. "Seriously, my wife won't care. If he wants to build a fake single life, maybe that lie deserves a little fresh air." I should probably tell you I did not say yes immediately. That is the part people never understand when they hear stories like this later. They think revenge feels obvious, clean, immediate. It doesn't. Mostly it feels sad. Mostly it feels like sitting alone in your car after work with both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, asking yourself how you ended up in a relationship where introducing yourself as someone's girlfriend could be considered sabotage. But under the sadness, something else had started waking up. Something steadier, something angrier. Not the kind of anger that throws plates. The kind that stands up slowly and says, "No, absolutely not. You do not get to turn me into a secret and then ask me to protect the lie." So I told him yes. The party was on Saturday night. Ryan told me he was going with his team and would be home late. He said it so easily. Didn't even bother inventing an excuse for why I wasn't included. By then, he really believed I had accepted it. Accepted being edited out. Accepted playing supportive girlfriend in private while he practiced being available in public. That afternoon, I took out my navy dress shirt, the nicer of the two, and laid it across my bed. Then I stood there for a long moment looking at it, feeling something strange settle over me. Not triumph, not nerves, just certainty. Whatever happened next, at least one thing would be true by the end of that night. He was going to have to look at me in a room full of people and realize I was real. My friend picked me up at 7. His wife, Emily, was already in the passenger seat, twisted halfway around so she could look at me the moment I opened the back door. "I've seen him at the office," she said immediately, like she had been waiting for this moment all week. Not up close, but enough to recognize him. "Good," I said, sliding in and pulling the door shut. "That'll make this less awkward." She smiled, but there was something sharp behind it. "Oh, I don't think awkward is the word for tonight." The drive over was strangely calm. No dramatic speeches, no pep talks. Just small, normal conversation about traffic, about work, about the playlist my friend insisted on controlling like it was a sacred responsibility. And maybe that was the strangest part of all, because beneath that calm surface, my pulse was steady in a way I didn't expect. Not racing, not panicking, just locked in. The venue was exactly what you'd expect from a company that wanted to impress itself. String lights draped across the ceiling, like someone had tried to recreate intimacy on a budget that was anything but modest. Cocktail tables scattered across the floor, a bar lined with glass and chrome, a DJ booth in the corner already pushing out bass heavy enough to make the floor hum faintly under my shoes. It was polished, curated, carefully designed to look effortless. We walked in together. Emily checked us in with a quick smile and a name, and just like that, I was inside a room I technically wasn't supposed to exist in. I took a drink from the bar, not because I needed it, but because holding something gave my hands somewhere to go. Then I looked. It took less than a minute to find him. Ryan was standing at a high-top table with 4 people, 3 men, 1 woman. He had a glass in his hand, head tilted back slightly as he laughed at something one of them said. He looked good, comfortable. Like he belonged exactly where he was. And that was the part that hit hardest. Because the version of him standing there, the one smiling easily, the one leaning in just enough when someone spoke, the one nodding like every conversation mattered, that version of him had no place for me in it. He didn't see me. Not yet. Emily touched my arm lightly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." And I was. Or at least I was steady enough to keep moving. We didn't go straight to him. That would have been a scene. And I hadn't come here to make a scene. I had come here to tell the truth. There's a difference. Emily started introducing me to a few people from her department. Easy, casual conversations. "What do you do?" "Diesel mechanic." "Oh, that's actually really cool. My uncle does that." "Yeah? Then you know it's not as glamorous as it sounds." Small laughs, polite smiles, normal party rhythm. And through it all, I could feel him across the room without looking directly at him again. Like my body had a sensor tuned specifically to his presence. It happened naturally. No grand announcement, no spotlight. Just a conversation drifting in a direction it couldn't avoid. Emily was talking to a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, sharp blazer, the kind of posture that suggested she ran more things than her title probably admitted. "Oh," the woman said at one point, glancing at me. I don't think we've met. We haven't, Emily said easily. Then she smiled, just slightly. This is Caroline. She's actually dating someone here. The woman's attention shifted fully to me. Really? She said. Who? There it was. The moment. Simple, clean, no drama. I followed her gaze across the room. Right to him. Ryan. Emily didn't hesitate. She lifted her hand just enough to indicate his table. The woman looked, and I watched it happen. Confusion first, then recognition, then something slower, something heavier. Her eyes widened just a fraction. Wait. She looked back at me. He has a girlfriend? I took a small sip of my drink before answering. 2.5 years, I said. There was a beat. Then she said very carefully, he told us he was single. Not implied. Not assumed. Told. I know, I said. Another pause. Then I added evenly, apparently it's a networking strategy. Her lips parted slightly, like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or apologize or ask a follow-up question she didn't quite have the words for. She didn't do any of those things. Instead, she turned to the person next to her and quietly repeated what she had just learned. That was how it started. Not with shouting, not with confrontation, with a whisper, then another, and another. It spread the way information always spreads in rooms like that. Sideways, subtle, impossible to stop once it finds traction. Within 15 minutes, I could feel the shift. People weren't staring outright, but conversations were changing. Eyes were lingering half a second longer than they should. Glances were being exchanged over shoulders. Not chaos, not even close. Just a quiet unraveling. I moved toward the bar again, partly to get another drink, partly to give the moment space to breathe. That's when one of the men from Ryan's table approached me. Late 20s, clean cut, slightly tense in the shoulders. Hey, he said, I'm Jason. I work with, he gestured vaguely behind him, with Ryan. Caroline, I said. He nodded, then hesitated. So, you're actually his girlfriend? There was something almost apologetic in the way he asked it. Yeah. He exhaled through his nose, like that confirmed something he'd been hoping wasn't true. Okay, he said, because he's told us, that he was single, like, multiple times. I'm aware. He shifted his weight. I asked him out for drinks last month. I blinked once, not because it shocked me, because it didn't. And? He said yes, Jason admitted, then canceled the day of. I nodded slowly. That tracks. There was an awkward silence, the kind that exists when two people realize they've both been standing inside someone else's lie. Well, he said finally, rubbing the back of his neck, that's good to know, I guess. Yeah, I said, it is. He gave me a tight, uncomfortable smile and walked away. And that was when I felt it. Not the room, not the whispers. Him. I didn't even have to turn around at first. I heard my name before I saw him. Caroline? Not loud enough to draw the whole room's attention, but sharp, tight, controlled in a way that meant it was about to slip. I turned. He was about 30 feet away, completely still, a drink frozen halfway to his mouth. And his face? I had never seen him look like that before. Not angry, not sad, just white. Like every version of the night he had planned had just collapsed in on itself. Then he started walking, fast. Caroline, he said again when he reached me, this time lower, teeth clenched just enough to make it sound like a warning instead of a greeting. What are you doing here? I held up my glass slightly. I'm a +1. His eyes flicked around the room like he was suddenly aware of how many people might be watching. You need to leave, he said under his breath. I'm having a good time, I replied. Your coworkers are really nice. A beat. Some of them seemed surprised to meet me, though. His jaw tightened. He reached for my arm, fingers closing just a little too hard around my wrist. Come with me. I let him pull me. Not because he deserved privacy, but because I wanted to hear what he would say when there was no audience to perform for. We stepped into the hallway just outside the main room. The music dulled instantly, replaced by the low hum of distant bass and the faint echo of laughter leaking through the walls. He dropped my arm like it burned him. Do you have any idea what you've done? He said. I tilted my head slightly. Introduce myself? This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. His hands went to his hair, pushing it back in a sharp, frustrated motion. You've completely blindsided me. I've been blindsided for 5 months. That's not the same thing. No, I said quietly. It's not. He stared at me, breathing uneven now. You've made me look like a liar. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, have I? His expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. You don't understand how this works, he said quickly, like he needed to outrun that moment. This environment, these relationships, there's nuance. Nuance, I repeated. Yes. Is that what we're calling it now? Caroline, you told them you were single. I didn't correct an assumption. You said it explicitly. I just heard it from at least one of your coworkers. His mouth opened. then closed, then opened again, slower this time. "This could cost me," he said. "Cost you what?" "My reputation, my trajectory, everything I've been building there." I stepped a little closer, not aggressively, just enough that he had to actually look at me instead of pass me. "If the truth costs you something," I said softly, "then the problem isn't the truth." He shook his head like I was missing something obvious. "You didn't have to do this here. You could have talked to me." "I did talk to you." "That's different." "How?" "You made it public." I held his gaze. "You made it a secret." That landed harder than anything else I'd said so far. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed. A short, sharp sound with no humor in it. "This is insane," he muttered. "This is actually insane." I shrugged slightly. "No, this is just visible." His eyes flashed then, anger finally breaking through the panic. "You've sabotaged me." I shook my head once. "No, Ryan, I showed up." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. "I'm not leaving," I added after a second. "Not because I want to hurt you, but because I'm not going to pretend I don't exist just to make your life easier." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. And maybe he didn't. Because the version of me he'd been living with for the past 5 months, the quiet one, the accommodating one, the one willing to wait and trust and give him the benefit of the doubt, she was gone. Or at least she was no longer in charge. After a long moment, he turned away, ran a hand over his face. Then, without another word, he walked back into the party. I stood there for a second longer, let the quiet settle back into my bones. Then I followed, not right behind him, not chasing, just returning. I stayed another hour, danced to 2 songs with Emily, who kept giving me these wide-eyed looks like she couldn't decide if she was witnessing a train wreck or a masterpiece. Had a long, surprisingly pleasant conversation with a project manager about engine systems, of all things. Ate 3 sliders that were honestly better than they had any right to be. And at some point, Emily dragged me into the photo booth. "Proof of life," she said, handing me a ridiculous fake mustache prop. I held it up, smiling in a way I hadn't expected to feel that night. Bright, unapologetic, real. She snapped the picture. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. Ryan didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "We need to talk, but just so you know, what you did was unforgivable." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. "What I did was show up. What you did was erase me. We can talk whenever you're ready, but I'm not apologizing." I set my phone down after that. And for the first time since this all started, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace. Not yet. But something close to it. Something like certainty. He came back 3 days later. Monday evening. I knew the second I heard his key in the lock that whatever was left of this relationship was about to be dragged into the open whether either of us liked it or not. There's a very specific kind of silence that fills an apartment when 2 people are no longer on the same side of something. It isn't loud. It isn't tense in an obvious way. It just sits there, heavy, waiting. Ryan walked in, dropped his bag a little harder than necessary, and didn't say hello. That was new. He always said hello, even on bad days, even when we'd argued. That small absence told me everything I needed to know about the kind of conversation we were about to have. He went straight to the kitchen table and sat down like he was preparing for a meeting. Not a conversation. A meeting. "Sit," he said. I leaned against the counter instead. "I'm good here." His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't push it. "My boss pulled me aside today." I crossed my arms loosely. "Okay." He let out a breath, slow, controlled, like he was still trying to manage how this looked instead of what it actually was. "Apparently," he continued, "someone told him that I've been telling people I'm single when I'm not." I didn't say anything, just waited. "He said it raises concerns," Ryan went on, "about my honesty in professional settings." There it was. Not the relationship. Not me. His honesty. I tilted my head slightly. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him it was a personal matter, that it has nothing to do with my work." And he said it's not about the relationship itself, it's about the pattern. Pattern. That word landed harder than anything else. Because patterns don't come from accidents. They come from choices. He said trust is the foundation of client-facing work, Ryan added, his voice tightening just a little as he repeated it. That perception matters. I let the silence stretch, not to punish him, just to make sure he actually heard what he was saying. Then he shifted, and I saw it coming before he even opened his mouth. That pivot. That moment where, instead of taking responsibility, someone looks for a way to move the blame. "I need you to call him." I blinked once. "Excuse me?" "I need you to call my boss," he repeated, leaning forward slightly now, urgency creeping into his tone. "And tell him that we were on a break when I started this job." For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. "You want me to what?" It's not a big deal, he said quickly. You can just say we weren't together at the time, that we only recently got back together. That way I technically didn't lie. I stared at him. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so completely, unbelievably absurd that my body needed somewhere to put it. You want me to lie to your boss, I said slowly. To cover the lie you told your entire office about me not existing. It's not lying, he snapped. It's reframing. I shook my head once. No, don't do that. Don't dress it up. Caroline, please, he said, and now there was something else in his voice, not just frustration. Fear. I could lose this job. You're not going to lose your job because your coworkers found out you have a girlfriend. You don't know that. I know that having a girlfriend isn't a fireable offense. It's not about that, he insisted. It's about credibility. Yeah, I said quietly. It is. He pushed back from the table slightly, running both hands through his hair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under right now. No, I said. I don't understand why you thought this was okay in the first place. That's not fair, isn't it? He stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This is my career, Caroline. This matters. And I didn't? That's not what I said. You didn't have to say it, I replied. You showed it. That hit something. I saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, in the way his eyes flickered for half a second before hardening again. He reached for the only argument he thought might still work. You don't get it, he said. You don't work in this kind of environment. There it was. I felt something inside me go very still. I fix trucks for a living, I said, and I've never once had to pretend the person I love doesn't exist to keep my job. He flinched, just slightly, but enough. You're twisting this, he said. This is different. How? He didn't answer that. Instead, he exhaled sharply and changed tactics again. She cried, he said suddenly. I frowned. Who? A woman from my team. She told me her boyfriend found out she'd been going out with coworkers who thought she was single too. It turned into this whole situation. HR got involved. I stared at him. Wait, I said slowly. What? He hesitated, just long enough to confirm it. They thought you were available, I said. More than one person. It wasn't like that. How many? That's not the point. How many, Ryan? He looked away. That was answer enough. I let out a slow breath, pressing my fingers lightly against my temple. Pieces started sliding into place whether I wanted them to or not. The late nights, the new perfume, the casual mentions of friends from work that never had names attached. How many people bought you things? I asked quietly. He didn't respond. I laughed again, softer this time. Wow! It wasn't like that, he repeated, but there was no conviction left in it. What was it like then? I asked. Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing it looks a lot like you let people believe you were single long enough to benefit from it, and now you're upset that reality showed up uninvited. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is sitting here asking me to clean it up for you. He slammed his hand lightly against the table, not enough to be violent, but enough to make a point. You're being cruel. I stared at him, and for the first time in this entire conversation, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. I tried being kind about this, I said. For months. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I respected your space. I trusted you. He didn't speak. I didn't go to that party to hurt you, I continued. I went because I was done being invisible. He swallowed. Then, softer now, you could have handled this differently. I did handle it differently, I said, for 5 months. Silence again. Thick, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and whatever was on the screen made his face tighten even more. What now? I asked. He hesitated. Just more stuff from work. I didn't need details. I could already see where this was going, because once a lie like that cracks open, it doesn't stop at the surface. It spreads. Later that night, after he left again, because of course he did, I got a call from Emily. Okay, she said without preamble. It's getting worse. I sat down on the couch, already bracing myself. How bad? Bad enough that people are talking about it outside your boyfriend's team, she said. At least 3 different guys thought he was single. One of them's been buying him lunch for weeks. I closed my eyes. Another one gave him a birthday gift, she added. Like an expensive one. The perfume. Of course. Yeah, I murmured. I know about that one. Caroline, she said carefully. There's more. Of course there is. One of those guys has a girlfriend, she said. And she found out. I sat up slightly. What? She showed up at the office earlier, Emily continued. Didn't make a huge scene, but enough that their team lead had to step in. Now HR's poking around. Not directly at Ryan, but this whole situation is creating noise. Noise. That was a polite way of saying consequences. I let out a slow breath. And I'm guessing he blames me. Oh, absolutely, she said. He's been telling people you ambushed him. I almost smiled. Of course he had. Because in his version of events, the worst thing that happened wasn't the lie. It was that someone refused to protect it. The next day, he called me 4 times. I didn't answer. When I finally did, it was only because I wanted to hear how far he was willing to go. "You've ruined my reputation," he said immediately. "No," I replied. "Your actions did that. People are treating me differently now." "Yeah," I said. "That's what happens when they realize you weren't being honest. You don't understand corporate dynamics. And you don't understand basic honesty." He hung up on me. 2 hours later, his mother called. Because of course she did. "Caroline," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "what you did was humiliating." I leaned back against the couch. I introduced myself. "You embarrassed him in front of his colleagues." "I tried handling it privately for 2 months. You should have been more supportive." "I was," I said, until support started meaning silence. She paused, then said something that settled everything in a way nothing else had. "Well," she said, "maybe if you had a more impressive career, he wouldn't have felt the need to keep things separate." There it was. Clean, honest, ugly. I closed my eyes for a second. Then I said, "Thank you." She sounded thrown. For what? For saying out loud what he wouldn't. And then I hung up. That night I packed his things. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just carefully. Folded clothes into boxes. Lined up his shoes by the door. Gathered the small things he'd left scattered around the apartment like he belonged there. The apartment was in my name. It always had been. That part, at least, was simple. When I finished, I stood there for a moment looking at the neat stack of boxes by the door. 2.5 years. Reduced to something that could be carried out in one trip. I picked up my phone and sent him a message. "Your things are packed. They're by the door. You can pick them up this week. Leave your key on the counter." He replied almost immediately. "You're seriously breaking up with me over this?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "I'm breaking up with you because you treated me like something to be ashamed of. The party just made it visible." I set my phone down after that, and this time, there was no doubt left. It's been about 6 weeks. That's long enough for the noise to die down. Not disappear. Things like this don't disappear, but settle into something quieter, something less dramatic, more permanent. The kind of damage that doesn't explode. It just stays. Ryan picked up his things on a Thursday while I was at work. I came home to an apartment that felt different in a way I couldn't immediately name. Not emptier exactly, just clearer. Like someone had wiped a fogged-up mirror and left me alone with whatever reflection I had been avoiding. His key was on the counter, right where I told him to leave it. Next to it was a folded piece of paper. I knew what it was before I even picked it up. A note. Of course it was a note. Ryan always preferred controlled communication. Messages he could edit, words he could shape. Conversations where he didn't have to deal with interruptions or reactions in real time. I opened it anyway. "I hope one day you realize what you threw away." That was it. No apology. No accountability. Just that. I stared at the sentence for a long moment, waiting to feel something sharp. Anger, sadness, regret. What I felt instead was nothing. Not emptiness. Not numbness. Just a quiet absence of attachment. I folded the paper back up, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into the recycling bin. That felt like the most honest response I had left. At his job, things didn't implode the way people like to imagine. No dramatic firing. No security escorting him out with a cardboard box. Real life doesn't usually give you that kind of clean ending. What happened instead was slower, more subtle, and in a lot of ways, worse. The HR review around the situation with the coworker's girlfriend eventually wrapped up without formal consequences. No official disciplinary action. No written warnings tied directly to Ryan. But it didn't need to. Because once people know you've been performing a version of yourself that isn't real, they start looking at everything else differently. Emily kept me updated, not out of gossip, but because she understood that sometimes closure comes in the form of knowing how things actually landed. "He's still there," she told me one night over dinner. "Same role, same title." I nodded. I figured. "But," she added, "he got pulled off that new client account he was excited about." "Why?" She gave me a look. The client requested someone they felt they could build trust with. Corporate language. Polite. Precise. Brutal. "Talent isn't the issue," Emily continued, mimicking the tone she'd overheard from one of the managers. "Judgment is." I let that sit, because that was the part Ryan never understood. This was never about whether he was good at his job. It was about whether people believed him when he spoke. And once that cracks, everything else starts to wobble. "He also got passed over for a project lead position," she said. "Gave it to someone with less experience." "Let me guess," I said. "Team cohesion?" She smiled faintly. "Something like that." None of it was loud, none of it was official. But it was consistent. The kind of quiet distancing that happens when people don't fully trust you, but don't want to create open conflict either. The guy from the party, the one who admitted he'd asked Ryan out, transferred to a different team. Not dramatically, just requested a change. Emily said it made things awkward. I imagine it did. The one who had been buying him lunch? That situation blew up in a completely different direction. His girlfriend found out. Not about Ryan specifically, but about the lunches, the attention, the assumption that the person he was investing time and money into was single. Apparently, she showed up at the office lobby one afternoon. Didn't scream, didn't make a spectacle, but upset enough that it forced people to pay attention. That's the thing about lies. They don't stay contained. They ripple outward into places you never intended to touch. And sometimes they burn people who weren't even part of the original story. The birthday gift? The perfume. I thought about that more than I expected to. Not because of the price. Not because of what it meant in a romantic sense. But because of the detail. I remembered standing in our bathroom weeks before all of this, leaning against the counter while he got ready for work. I'd caught a hint of something new when he walked past me. "That smells nice," I'd said. "Is that new?" He'd smiled casually. "Yeah, a friend from work got it for me. She's got good taste," I said. "Yeah," he replied. "She's sweet." He had adjusted the lie. Not just hidden me, reshaped reality in small, precise ways to make the story cleaner. That's what stayed with me. Because that kind of detail, that's not accidental. That's practiced. His social circle took a hit too. Emily ran into one of his close friends at a coffee shop a few weeks after everything happened. They ended up talking. Apparently, the friend said, "I love him, but he keeps saying Caroline ruined his career, and I keep asking him what she actually did." Emily told me that part slowly, watching my face. "And?" I asked. "He couldn't answer," she said. Of course he couldn't, because there's only so many ways you can repackage the truth before it collapses under its own weight. Eventually, even people on your side start noticing the gaps. His mother tried one more time. A long message, paragraph after paragraph, about how I'd never find someone as driven as Ryan, how I'd regret this, how I should appreciate what I had instead of tearing it down. I read it once, then I took a screenshot and sent it to my friend with one line underneath. Motivation to stay single for a while. I didn't reply to her. There was nothing left to say. As for me, I'm okay. Not great. Not completely over it, but steady. There are moments, quiet ones, where I miss the version of him I thought I was with. The one who used to sit in the passenger seat of my truck, singing badly along to the radio. The one who told me he loved that I worked with my hands because it meant I could fix anything. Funny how that turned into the very thing he felt the need to hide. But those moments don't last as long as they used to, because they don't exist in isolation anymore. They're attached to the full picture now, and the full picture doesn't lie. I still go to work, still spend my days under the hood of trucks, solving problems that actually have answers. Still play rec league basketball on Wednesdays. Still only own 2 dress shirts. Though now, one of them has a story attached to it. Emily printed out the photo booth picture from that night and handed it to me a week after everything ended. "You need this," she said. In the photo, I'm holding that ridiculous fake mustache prop, grinning. Not because everything was fine, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't being hidden. I keep it on my fridge now. Not as a trophy. Not as revenge. Just as proof. Proof that I showed up. That I didn't let someone else's version of me become the only one that existed. People have asked me if I regret going to that party. If maybe it would have been better to just walk away quietly once I found out. Maybe. Maybe that would have been easier. Cleaner. But there's something about standing in a room full of people who were told you don't exist. And saying, without raising your voice, "Actually, I'm right here." That mattered. Not to them. Not even to him. To me. Ryan is still at the same company, last I heard. Same role. Same building. Still building whatever version of himself he thinks will get him further. And maybe, at some point, he'll figure out that no amount of polishing can fix a foundation built on something that fragile. Or maybe he won't. It's not my problem anymore. In my phone, his contact is gone. Not renamed. Not archived. Deleted. Because unlike him, when I move on, I actually do.